Aragon, and Aragon is a platform to run decentralized organizations. So you can create these organizations that live in the blockchain and don't need an intermediary to work. We both work on the development tools to make that happen, and in a very modular framework, so you can have different apps that do different functionalities inside the organization, like a Vault app, a voting app, so you can swap out different governance mechanisms on how this decentralized organization is governed. But we also work on a beautiful front end, so users from all around the world can use it in countries where they need it, or in places where it's very hard to organize because the government is corrupt, or other series of things. So we're also working on making it very, very usable.
Yeah, and I think that the Aragon app is a great example of a DApp, right? It's nice to look at, and it's great to use, and it's definitely seems to be kind of blazing the trail for kind of usable dApps. So one of the things I've noticed that Aragon is quite involved in is you're quite involved in the EIP, or there's a few EIPs that you're definitely involved in. Do you want to talk about some of the EIPs that you kind of find particularly interesting that are kind of ongoing at the moment?
Yeah, I can. I don't know the exact numbers because the EIP process is so like the numbers are terrible, but. Yeah. I know we are involved in a couple of EIPs that are very relevant. One of them is for standardizing a staking interface. So this EIP is basically about making sure that when we stake, which is almost like a crypto economic a principle, like staking is such a fundamental thing in the crypto economies that wasn't possible with non-crypto assets before. So now we have this primitive in the crypto economic world. We have to make sure that when we stake, we can stake using the same interface and the same standards everywhere, basically. So we are thinking, even for stuff like Casper, being able to stake your Ether, I think it makes a lot of sense to have a common EIP, a common standard, a common interface, so you don't have to create different UIs, you don't have to create different ways of interacting with any staking mechanism, just use one. We're also working on another EIP, or we have submitted one EIP about proxies, which are this very important milestone to make Ethereum smart contracts operatable. And so the idea with proxies is that you are able to determine multiple versions of a contract because you can upgrade a reference to that final contract where the code is, so you can have different versions and update that over time. You can have any governance mechanism to update that. But this EIP is just about standardizing what a proxy does, basically. And I think we're gonna see a lot of stuff like that in the coming months, because we have figured out a way to pretty much the upgradability of smart contracts as a community, and that's a pretty strong argument versus people that are like, oh, Ethereum is immutable. If you have a bug in your app, it's forever there, which is not true with proxies.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting. So proxies, and I guess kind of delegate call has some bad press, let's say, because it's sort of related to some of the higher profile hacks and kind of loss of funds in various ways. Do you think a standard is the way to resolve some of those problems?
Yeah, well, standards raise awareness about things, right? So I think they are clearly not the way to solve it, but at least it helps, and it helps document how you should do it in the proper way.
Okay, so Polymath's kind of business is helping companies, and sometimes more traditional companies, issue security tokens. So these are tokens which are kind of compliant, have KYC built in, and we do use, for kind of upgradability type purposes, we do use delegate call and so on. Do you see, how do you kind of view the utility versus sort of security token split, and how that could kind of evolve over the next 1 to 2 years?
Is there a question about where there is a chain split, what happens with security tokens? Or?
So not so much a chain split, but I guess, so at Polymath, so over the last 18 months, we've seen lots and lots of utility tokens get issued, including obviously Aragon's token and lots of other organizations' tokens. And our kind of thesis is that over the next 2 years, let's say, in the future, there'll be this kind of shift from utility tokens towards security tokens as companies kind of get more comfortable and familiar with blockchain technology. Is that something you kind of agree with, or is it something you think will happen, or do you think utility tokens will kind of continue to dominate?
Well, I think there are going to be two trends. There are going to be kind of two extremes. On one hand, you have the traditional organizations who have to be compliant with the traditional legal system, and for that they need to issue securities sometimes, and for that in order to, not to go to jail, they need to like issue security tokens that are legally compliant. But then you have the other part of the spectrum, which is, this new world of decentralized organizations and this new world of anonymous individuals that organize on the internet and that no one has central control over the protocol. And it's a new way of organizing that is blockchain native. And for that, you can do a utility token, you can do a governance token, or you can even do like a security token, but just like don't legally comply, because if it's an anonymous protocol, like who cares, right? It's like if the SEC says that Bitcoin is a security, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Nothing. They can shut it down, and that's the magic of crypto.
That's very true. So one of the things Aragon's done an amazing job in is kind of engaging the community around your product and your kind of business and what you're trying to achieve. What were some of the kind of challenges and opportunities you see, particularly in the blockchain space, for community engagement?
Well, I think the most important is that communities right now are incentivized to pump their token and just do like certain profit and exit. And a lot of people in the community are used to that, and they are like, oh, when Binance, when Polo, when whatever. Yeah. And I think it's important to stay, core to our principles and say, hey, I'm sorry, no, we're going to work on, the core things that we have to work on to make like long-term value versus short-term profit. And I think that takes a lot of work, because sometimes you have to be very defensive of your core values. And that's something that we are doing now. We are actually compiling our values and publishing a manifesto, because then, we have seen this happen in various communities. Like, for example, in Bitcoin, people are like, oh, Satoshi's vision was this or that. And then you have like religions, for example. People, see the Bible in like 1,000 different ways. So having a way that is very, like learning from that and having like a core list of values that you can prioritize from when you have trouble, and you can show the community, hey, you are not, complaining with our values. Or the community can say, you guys are not complaining with the values. I want a new, leadership. I think that's wonderful. So we're working towards sort of standardizing our values.
So I think it's really interesting. I think, as you say, having that kind of core vision and values, especially documenting it, right, in a kind of transparent way is, and that, that's kind of a lot of what the blockchain's about, is that kind of transparency and so on. So I know you said you're working on it, but is there one kind of particular core value or part of your vision that you can share?
Well, the core one is simple, and it's freedom, and it's empowering individual freedom to choice. And I think blockchain by itself does an amazing job on that, because if you like something and you have a way to exercise governance, usually you can. Not right now, because we don't have decentralized organizations yet, but when we have them, it's going to be very easy to coordinate and signal what you prefer to do in your community or in your project. And if you don't like it, you can always fork it. So that's why I think freedom is such a core value to everything we're building. Okay,
that makes sense. So that means like individuals' freedom to basically either accept what you're doing or fork away and kind of make their own decisions or whatever, their own version. Okay, very interesting. So on the kind of more technical side, and obviously we're at a developer conference with lots of interesting things going on. Is there any particular kind of like improvement in the network that's planned, or anything you're particularly excited about that's kind of coming down the pipeline in terms of Ethereum?
Well, something that it doesn't have to do directly with the technical part of it, but it still has to do to some extent, is signaling, having some way that the Ethereum community can receive signals from the network and the miners and the dApp developers and basically all the stakeholders of the network to make governance decisions. Because right now we're seeing it with like EIP 999 or with like the Ether issuance or the ASIC miners, all of that. Those are very controversial decisions and that have proven that we don't have any governance mechanism for Ethereum at all. And so it's hard to reason about making such changes if you don't have a framework to reason about that first. And I'm very excited about this upcoming event called EIP 0 that just happened here, in which basically a set of stakeholders that are very relevant in the community just got together and we're like, okay, we got to figure out some basic form of Ethereum governance. It doesn't have to be on-chain. It doesn't have to be formalized. It just has to be something in which we can know the signals, we can perceive the signals that users and the community is sending us to make these changes, and based on those, you can fork, or you can decide not to fork, or you can make some decisions on like token issuance or stuff like that. So I think that's very exciting. And then there's a technical part to it, obviously. How do you make sure that if you forks don't really cost any trouble because it's basically for users to just download like a precompiled version of the fork that they are going to run or something like that. So it's that's the other phase of it. Like how do we make it easier for the client developers to embrace forks?
So that's interesting. So, I mean, do you see the kind of resolutions where there are these kind of big controversies, as you say, with EIP 999 or ASICs mining and those types of controversies? Do you see the kind of the optimal solution being that the chain kind of splits in one group, and then both kind of groups happily go their own direction, much like we saw obviously with Ethereum Classic, with the DAO hack, whenever that happened, sort of 18 months ago or something? Or would you rather that these kind of governance solutions are used kind of almost like forced consensus? So if there is a consensus, even if it's 51% of people or something agree, or choose a side, that everyone's then kind of pushed or encouraged to coalesce on that side?
Yeah, I think, Ethereum has gone through some forks already, and usually if there's no community split, it's totally fine. So I would actually encourage to continue, down that road. I think, there was Ethereum Classic. That was the only, and actually that was because, Ethereum community made a decision about governance without having a governance framework, and so some people got pissed off, and, well, actually they didn't fork. Ethereum forked, but which is funny to think about. But yeah, in general, I think the less community forks we have, because that's important. That's what sets Ethereum apart. You can fork any chain and have your own chain running. It doesn't matter. But the community, you cannot fork that away. So if you fork the community, obviously we're going to lose some network value, which we don't want to.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, obviously in Bitcoin we've seen, maybe not that dissimilar to Ethereum Classic and Ethereum, which is obviously Bitcoin Cash being the major fork, but there's obviously been a series of smaller forks, Bitcoin Gold, and I think many more after that. And it does seem, as you say, you're going to lose some network effect every time there's this sort of dilution of but equally, I guess, if there are issues like with the Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin fork, if there are issues which simply can't be resolved, right? You can't get to a majority. It is one solution. So do you want to talk a little bit how an organization like Polymath would benefit from using Aragon to help its kind of organization?
Well, you mean in the sense of if someone wants to run an organization which has a security token on chain?
Or no, so in terms of the Polymath, the company itself using Aragon to help organize and sort of structure ourselves as an organization.
I think that's brilliant. How we're trying to use Aragon ourselves is, for example, like payroll. I think a lot of crypto organizations do payroll using crypto. We pay people using Ether, for example, and ANT. And sometimes it's kind of cumbersome to do that. Or sometimes even in bigger organizations, you have someone who just does payroll, which is a huge waste of time if you can automate it away. And so with Aragon, we have a payroll app, and you can basically each employee, each block can get their payroll. So you can get each new block, you can get the proportional part of it, which is interesting. And then you can choose the tokens that you want. Do you want Ether? Do you want ANT? Do you want both in different quantities? So I think that's important. Then you can have tokens which represent shares in the company or something like that, which actually you guys can use yourselves to do that probably, which is funny. And then you can have vesting also. So you can have all of these different things automated away.
That's great. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Louis.
Yeah, thanks.
It's great to meet you. Thank you very much. Cheers.